So, welcome everybody here. My name is Pascal Junod, and I have been a cryptographer now for a long time, hopping between the academic world, the industry. Now I'm currently working for a large social network that kids mostly use. So, it doesn't work. It works. So I propose myself to speak about a little bit about white box cryptography. So I'm going to introduce the subject through a real-world scenario, then give you a few notions about white box crypto. I'm going to speak a bit about security models because white box crypto is doing cryptography in a very specific security model. I will give you also an academic viewpoint because the current view of the academic world is pretty different of what we do in the industry. And then I'm going to give you a kind of list of recipes to how to build secure enough white box crypto if you need to, what you have to care about, what you have to watch. And eventually I will speak about the difficulties of doing white box crypto, even if you have a white box crypto primitive, that it's for long not that you have a working implementation of a cryptographic modes or a cryptographic protocol. So let's go to our standard scenario. This is pretty much common, so let's assume that you have a mobile application that would like to talk to some kind of backend. Let's say that you are at the moment that you don't have a lot of authentication, maybe at the sign-up procedure. Let's assume that you would like to secure a bit the sign-up procedure with respect, for instance, to mass registering of accounts that could be used by bots or by spammers or I don't know. Maybe you don't like to use captchas because captchas are not that secure and are annoying for people. So what can you do? So it means you can have no security. Of course, you just send a request. Maybe that request will be encrypted using a TLS channel. Maybe you are going to use certificate pinning. But as you all know, it's very easy to bypass certificate pinning, and it's extremely easy to reverse engineer the API, the backend API. So it means that for almost free, a bad guy could just figure out the backend API and just call it from anywhere. So what you would like to have is a bit more assurance that this comes from your mobile application and not from a bad guy. So what you could do is to say yourself, okay, I'm going to authenticate those requests, cryptographically authenticate. In that case, it means that you will have to embed a secret, a cryptographic key, proving that or allowing the mobile application to sign or to authenticate those queries. So what you are going to do maybe is to hardcode a cryptographic key within your application and use that cryptographic key. So it could be a symmetric key or an asymmetric one. Maybe it's just a secret shared with your backend, and use a cryptographic MAC to sign or to authenticate your requests. So you are going to hardcode a key value in your application. You are going to use maybe the standard crypto library that you have at your disposal that is offered by the system, OpenSSL on Android, maybe Common Crypto on iOS. But then what happens if your MAC key gets stolen? So basically, an adversary that would like to replicate this effort just has to find the hard-coded cryptographic key within your application and use it. And it's common crypto. It can just do exactly the same, and a new time, it will cost almost virtually nothing to the bad guy. So now you can go even a step further. You are going to browse the web and see that there exists white box cryptography implementation for sale, pretty expensive. There are not so many vendors, but they say that they offer you some guarantees with respect to key extraction, meaning that they are going to offer you the capabilities or maybe computing a Mac. So they will give you a blob of software, blob of executable code that embeds, that you can personalize, that embeds a secret key, and for which it's claimed to be difficult or very costly to extract that secret key. So cool, now you have a very nice mobile application, an APK, if we are on the Android platform. And maybe you have a dynamic library that embeds some white box crypto native code, and that embeds a secret key within it. That is probably difficult to extract, or that will require a lot of reverse engineering work to extract. Now, what could do the adversary or the bad guy is just not trying to extract the secret key, but just use the white box Mac primitive in that case, and use it as a kind of signing oracle. So here the code embed the secrets, but you can, instead of just extract the secret and use it with standard code, you can just use that very obfuscated and complicated code and use it for the same purpose. So this is an attack that is called code lifting, and of course that is possible. And for the adversary, still it's an attack that costs not a lot of money. So you will have to go a step further, most likely, and to mix this white box implementation with the application. So mix, how are we going to mix? I'm going to discuss that later. But the idea is really to have everything for the business logic of the mobile application and the cryptographic code securely embedding the key together and glued together, so that it will be strictly more costly and much more difficult for the bad guy to extract the boundaries of the white box crypto and to use it as a signing oracle. Maybe it will be possible for him with a lot of efforts, a lot of money, but that's really the goal. It's to make the life of the bad guy more costly, more difficult. And this is if you don't have any secure hardware at your disposal, so any secure element that can hide that MAC key, then it's pretty much what you can do. So let's speak a bit about white box crypto. So essentially, white box cryptography deals not with papers or algorithms, but with implementations that embeds secrets, implementations of cryptographic algorithm, and that are running in what we call the white box security model, which is basically the most hostile possible computing environment. So I'm going to define this a bit more later. And why is it an interesting subject? Because you know, the white box security model is really the relevant security model when you are in certain scenarios, and actually in many scenarios, in many real-world ones. And it is not always the one we think about when we are thinking about crypto. And I found also quite interesting to observe that there is a real significant gap between the academic state of the art and the way how academics look at this white box security model and their industry practices. So basically, as I said before, the white box security model is very relevant in practice because hackers work, or crackers or bad guys or adversary work in that model since the beginning, but mostly my mic is fighting. Mostly, so this security pressure induce the industry to require such kind of secure implementation of crypto. And for instance, this was recently even boosted by the Oscar emulation effort. So this is basically a way to do NFC payment, so a kind of standard allowing to do NFC payment without any secure element like a smart card or a TPM chip, for instance. And this was also addressed by other industries, like for instance, the content protection industry. deploying software-only DRMs and the like. So there is some pressure for the field for such technology, which still keeps today a kind of niche technology. So if before you thought that cryptography is magic, because it's a lot of formulas and stuff, then I can assure you that white box crypto is really something even more magic. So magic to the square, even more. Why? Because if you are able to design and to implement white boxed crypto primitives, it essentially allows you to transform an RS symmetric encryption scheme into a public key scheme, which looks like impossible, kind of magic, completely crazy at least, or it would allow you to transform a MAC, embedding a symmetric key, into an asymmetric digital signature. So this sounds very interesting because RSA is a costly operation, or any other public key primitive is quite costly. So if you manage to use a very fast to transform a very fast crypto primitive like AES in a public key scheme, then maybe you can get rich and get the crypto graal, and that's very funny. But you know, magic is sometimes not so magic, so we'll see why. Let's speak about security models now a bit more in details. So I am going to speak about black box, gray box, and white box security. First of all, let's speak about black box security. So this is the model or the abstraction that have been used by cryptographers for forever. In that model, the crypto primitive like AES or asymmetric encryption scheme, authenticated encryption, a MAC, public key encryption, digital signature, they are just abstracted by black boxes. We call also them oracle in the crypto world. And basically, what is a black box is just a well-defined and secure API, which the adversary respects. So, you know, when you have the two words adversary and respect in the same sentence, this should ring a bell, because adversaries don't tend to respect things. But basically, the cryptographers have worked in that model and defined that model, and it's quite useful because you can very formally modelize, for example, for encryption schemes, attacks such as ciphertext only, non-plaintext, chosen plaintext, chosen ciphertext, maybe in an adaptive or non-adaptive way. And basically, it offers a kind of mathematical framework in which you can prove things. So this is quite useful. Same for signature schemes, for instance, so with attack models such as existential, selective, or universal forgeries. At least the black box security model allows to define a very sound and precise framework in which the mathematicians and cryptographers can work to derive security proofs and the like. But, of course, this is not the end of the story, because in the middle of the 90s, the academic community has known the gray box security model, mainly with papers by Paul Kocher and Dan Bonnet and others that have introduced timing attacks against cryptographic implementations, differential power analysis on hardware implementation or smart cards implementation of cryptographic algorithms. And basically, this gray box security model has triggered a lot of academic research and industrial research because we will see it is very relevant in practice. And basically, it is defined as being a strict superset of the black box security. So it means that in the gray box security model, your bad guys have all the same capabilities than in the black box one, plus additional power. And typically this additional power involves the exploitation of some mostly physical information about the scheme implementation. So now we are not speaking only about papers, algorithms, and mathematics, but we are really already speaking about implementations, being software or hardware implementations that leak that could leak some information which is correlated to the secrets, For instance, it could leak the time it takes to do a secret operation. It could leak the power consumption it needs to require a secret operation, or if we consider hardware chips, you could have electromagnetic emanations, optical emanations, sound leakage in certain setups, or so this is all kind of passive attacks, meaning that you will probe the implementations and for some physical signal and get some information that you can correlate and with a standard known plaintext or chosen plaintext or chosen ciphertext attack. But you can also be a bit more active and inject faults, for instance, by glitching the chip or by using a laser on an ASIC or something like that, and observe the behavior of the implementation under fault. So when the implementation computes without fault, when it computes with a fault, and just correlate those two behavior, and then extract, usually in a very efficient way, information about the secrets that are embedded into the chip. Unfortunately, so those attacks have been there for many years now. We have a lot of work on defenses against these kind of attacks, but for sure, when you begin to defend against and to implement defense schemes, then it's going to cost also some computing power, some chip area, and you already have to take a trade-off between the security that you need and the defense cost that you are going to embed into your product. Obviously, this is still not the end of the story, because most of the time, at least if we consider software-only implementation, the attacker has still a lot more power. So this is the white box security model. It was introduced, so it is really the one that is used by bad guys, because why refrain to use all the tools and all the techniques we have at our disposal, at least in a software-only setting. So, but interestingly, it was introduced only in 2002 into the academic literature by academics and people working in the industry, and basically those are the worst conditions we can dream about to do crypto, because of course, those kind of adversaries have all black box possibilities. They have all gray box possibilities, plus additional power. And what is this additional power? It's simply a full control of the implementation and its environment. So it means that it can perform static or dynamic reverse engineering with all kind of tools that we have at our disposal today. It means that we can inject arbitrary fault at arbitrary location, at arbitrary time, as many times as we want to, which is not always possible to do it with hardware, because there are synchronization issues and when you are doing fault injection. It means that you can have, the bad guy can inspect in an arbitrary way the content of the CPU registers, of the RAM, of the storage, meaning that if you just have a hard-coded key, you just stop the program, read the key, and that's it. Okay, so white box setting is really the worst security model that we can think about. So black box security is mainly relevant for cryptography operated in trusted environments, like for instance a remote and properly secured API, for instance a signing oracle for a CA within an HSM. This could be considered as being where black box security would make sense, but I'm not saying it's not useful. It's basically our mathematical insurance that the crypto is secure, at least as secure as a hard problem, as we tend to define it. Gray box security is very relevant to secure hardware environment. Smart cards, USB dongles, TPMs, secure chipsets, and now common shelf CPUs, as we have seen that with the attacks against the microarchitectural attacks against the Intel CPU make it very relevant in certain situations. So gray box security is really for hardware related implementation or considerations. And white box security is very relevant for software-only implementations. So when you don't have any secure hardware at your disposal, which is a very, very frequent scenario. So basically, it happens all the time when we run software on untrusted endpoints, like mobile phone, laptop, etc. This is also this model is also known as the man at the end security model, which is completely different of the other two. So let's have a look at the academic viewpoints. So basically, white box crypto was introduced by Cho and other people in 2002, and they just proposed design for a secure DES and secure AES embedding a hard-coded secret key, supposed to resist to key extraction. So basically, I won't go into much detail into how it was implemented, but it consisted of pre-computed tables, and the implementation was just a sequence of lookups in those tables. So an implementation was quite large, hundreds of kilobytes, maybe a few megabytes. But unfortunately, all those designs have been quickly broken using either standard cryptanalysis techniques or gray box type of attacks like fault injection or differential computation analysis, which is a kind of DPA applied to this kind of implementation. And last year, there was even a WeBox context, so a contest where everybody was able to submit instances of white-boxed AES, such that people could also break it and try it. It was possible to submit anonymous design, which was quite good because maybe some industry people sent some proposal, and all of them were completely broken. Still, the most secure one was broken only after 1 month of intense cryptanalysis by PhD students. So it means that you see that there is still a lot of time to invest to break a good instance, a good white box stuff. Now, the academics have also tried to formalize what means resistance into the white box model, and several notions have been formalized. I just would like to outline that in all of those models, the white box compiler, so taking a standard implementation and transforming it into a white boxed implementation, is supposed to be public. So which is quite maybe not so relevant in the industry, where you can keep your white box compiler secret anyway. So the strongest notion is VBB with virtual black box property. So essentially, if you have a VBB obfuscator and you apply it on a program P, everything which can be computed from the obfuscated program is the same that if you give an oracle to the program P to the adversary. It means that it's really this notion, if a VBB compiler exists, means that you really transform your program into a black box, which the only thing you can do is just to play submit plaintext and get ciphertext, or submit message and get signature and this. So this is a very, very strong notion. Of course, it is so strong that it was shown that a generic obfuscator does not exist. So a generic obfuscator is an obfuscator that is able to protect every program, because the researchers just exhibited a program that cannot be obfuscated. Still, we know a few VBB obfuscators for very specific mathematical functions like point functions. So the fact that there is no VBB obfuscator for every kind of program does not rule out the possibility that you have a VBB obfuscator for some classes of program. So, but still, this is a very powerful notion, maybe too powerful. So the guys have also introduced a weaker notion, which is indistinguishability obfuscation. So basically, if you have an IO obfuscator, and here we are not speaking about program, but about secrets, which is slightly different, because in a secret you don't have loops, for instance. And you apply your IO obfuscator on two equivalent secrets, so secrets that perform the same computation. The two outputs should be indistinguishable. So this is the IO notion. This became very popular about 4 years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago in the academic world. Why? Because a first inefficient candidate has been published. So it triggered a lot of academic research, assuming now that we have an IO obfuscator, what can we do? And actually it was demonstrated that you can build a lot of crypto primitives out of such a tool. But still, we don't know how to design an IO obfuscator that is really secure and really efficient. So this is still work in progress. And there are other notions that are more related to the design that have been presented, like wide-wideness, or it's also called strong white box. So given the implementation of an encryption scheme, it is infeasible to decrypt. So it implies key extraction, of course, because if you have if you manage to extract the key out of an AES white box instance, you can decrypt trivially. We have some proposals, but they all rely on public key, which is, and this kind of wide-wideness property is kind of trivial to implement with public key, so we don't have any proposal just using symmetric key techniques. And so people were a bit, you know, when the security models are too difficult to work in, what you are doing is just you relax the security model, and they say, okay, maybe we can try to achieve incompressibility at least, meaning that if you have a huge white box instance, at least I can guarantee that nobody can take this huge crypto instance, maybe 1 gigabyte of code, and reduce it to a smaller instance. It could be useful in certain scenario when you would like to have exfiltration of secret stuff difficult. Okay. So here, it is the only scenario where we know good proposals because there are several solutions. So they mainly typically use large pseudo-random pre-computed tables that is impossible to compress unless you break, for instance, AES or a secure pseudo-random generator. So we don't have a very strong and efficient mathematical tool, so still we need a white box crypto, white box primitive. So how are we going to do that? So let's assume now that we are looking for a good resistance to key extraction at least. It is sufficient to, if you can extract the key, it's sufficient to break wide-wideness. It's not always necessary, as we'll see it later. So what are the requirements? What must you take care of when you design such a primitive? So of course you will have to address all these bad guys classes here. So first of all, for sure, you need a secure crypto, because without secure crypto, you won't even be secure in the black box model. But you will have to settle many engineering details. For instance, whether you are going to have a static key, so a real static embedded key, or a white box that allows to take dynamic key. It depends on the updatability of your instances, and it depends also on if one instance is broken, what can I tell on further instance that will be generated by the same compiler. You have to think about the crypto primitive. Maybe you have requirement such that it is a standard crypto primitive, because you are using a standard that rely on AES and RSA and standard elliptic curves. Maybe you need a mode of operations. So this is something that where many subtle details can hide. And of course, so do you need a standard algorithm, or is it possible for you to use a custom and secret algorithm? I know some of you will say, "Ooh, it's bad." Of course, it's bad. And another engineering detail you have to define is how you are going to derive randomness on an untrusted endpoint. And this is a very, very tough question. Of course, you will have to resist gray box adversaries. So you will have to follow all the good guidelines to make an implementation that is resistant to side channel attacks. It will have to be time constant. Depending on the algorithm, it can be tricky. It's more simple for AES, for instance. If you are going to use blinding techniques, then you will have to rely on randomness, but you cannot trust randomness extracted out of the platform. So You cannot use only randomness coming out of the platform, and you will have to take care about interaction with code obfuscators, so normal standard obfuscators. Why? Because existing time dependencies can be amplified by obfuscating compilers. Just think about code virtualization. If you have a teeny difference with a code and you virtualize its code using a code virtualizer, then this timing difference can be really amplified. You will maybe have higher sensitivity to cache misses because you are using a lot of data that won't fill that will fill the cache. And even worse, time dependencies can sometimes be also accidentally introduced by obfuscating compilers. Your white box implementation must be leakage free. So this is a nice requirement, but it's extremely difficult to implement in practice. So first of all, you will have to define the number of probes that you're going to allow. Usually in the hardware world, you will allow 1, 2, maybe 3 probes. But in a white box setting, the guy can have higher order attacks up to 100 probes if he wants. So here you have to choose a trade-off. Of course, splitting secret data in multiple statistically uncorrelated shares is possible, but a new time you will have to rely on randomness because most leakage prevention mechanisms are using some kind of secure, independent, statistically independent randomness. And of course, your white box implementation must resist to false attacks. And so we know a lot of strategies to protect against this kind of false attacks, like redundant computations, internal integrity checks, maybe use also, so you will have to protect against faults into the data, which is done by the 2 first bullets, but you will also have to protect faults against the code. For instance, you can just remove a check by nopping a branch, so you will have to use standard software tamper-proofing techniques as well. Of course, the main challenge here is the final performance of your implementation. If you can afford to compute an AES in 1 hour, then it's fine. You can do a lot of things. If you must do it in less than 1 millisecond on a cheap mobile phone, it's another story. And eventually, you will have to protect against white box attacks. So as of today, we don't have any choice but to accept to use a pragmatic approach, meaning that it is like that because we don't have any efficient cryptographic obfuscation tool in our hands. It's still research in project, research ongoing now. And today, size and performance matter in practice, so you won't be able to inject a 1 gigabyte white box instance into a mobile phone for an app. And basically, your goal is just be making the adversary's job as costly as possible. So what you can do is to use 3 different strategies that I'm going to discuss now. So first of all, what you can do is to rely on secrecy. So in a white box context, the security model is extremely tough for the defender. So you can also afford stuff that is usually not recommended. So whenever possible, you can get rid of Kerckhoffs's principle, saying that the adversary knows everything but the secret data, so knows the white box compilers, knows the algorithm specification, etc., etc. So here you can use custom algorithms, secret algorithms. So it's really, you can consider it as being security by obscurity, or by considering that obscurity on top of a secure implementation, which has a teeny layer of defenses. Of course, if your algo is not protected with respect to sidechain attacks and you are using Caesar cipher, then you're doomed anyway. So, and this is a tricky business because if you would like to design your own crypto, it's better to have a crypto black belt. So yeah, you have to be careful here. Now, another attack you would like to defend against is code lifting. So basically, code lifting is just use of a white box implementation as a encryption, decryption, signature oracle. So the bad guy who won't try to extract the key and understand how it is working would just use the big executable blob and use it like you are using it in your own application. So it requires to reverse engineering the white box crypto API boundaries and to understand how it works. It's pretty easy with most of the time it's pretty easy if your white box crypto is embedded into a dynamic library. It's a bit less easy if everything is statically linked into a large blob of native code. But here attacks are like common attacks that pop-ups are hooking and all this kind of stuff. So what you can do is to implement two things. For instance, in a DRM setting, you could use what we call encodings. So if here we have a kind of construction which resembles a key ladder. So we have a first AES that encrypts a session key that is then used to decrypt, I don't know, a movie, for instance. And this session key is going to change quite frequently. So the key that encrypts the session key could be, for instance, embedded into a white box in a white boxed AES instance. But it means that if you would like to protect against code lifting, what you are going to do is maybe to add a layer, a kind of secret encoding function at the output of the AES and the corresponding inverse of that secret encoding in the input of the key into the descrambler here, the media descrambler. And maybe this part here can be updated very frequently by software using a network, but maybe that stuff here is embedded into a secure chip, a secure system on chip, and cannot so it means and cannot be updated so easily. So it means here that you cannot use AES if you manage to extract the key. Still, you have some more work to do and to reverse the encoding as well to be able to emulate that stuff. The other defense that you can take is what I am calling code dissolving. So basically, if you have some native code here with some parts which are white box implements your white box crypto, what you can try to do is to dissolve that code, that native code. Oops, I broke everything. What happens? I touched the cable. Yeah, let's try it a new time. Never touch a computer, it's too dangerous. Yeah, it works. Here we go. And try to dissolve the white box instance with your business logic code around. So it means here you are going to use a software obfuscator, and that is able to split functions or split basic blocks and to merge basic function and merge basic blocks and to do a kind of soup of code, of binary code that embeds everything, so that it's very difficult to carve the white box crypto and to use it as an oracle, for instance. I have a bit of time to discuss about some tricky parts of white box cryptography. So when you think about cryptographic functionalities, mostly in the academic world, people think about one symmetric cipher like AES or TripleS. But crypto is not about block cipher, it's really about authenticated encryption or mode of operations for encrypting large chunk of data. And if you look at several examples, then you are going to see that it's not so easy to have a secure white box instance. So if, for instance, if you take just a mode of operation that transfers a block cipher into a stream cipher, like the counter mode or output feedback mode or the cipher feedback mode, basically, those modes of operation do not provide any inherent resistance to inversion. So basically, if you have an AES in counter mode encryption oracle, so it's obviously trivial to transform it into AES decryption oracle because you just have to swap plaintext and ciphertext and it works. So this is not very white box, and this is something you have to take about. If you take here a counter feedback mode, basically all you have to identify into the implementation is to identify that output here, because you can swap plaintext and ciphertext, but basically what you have to inject into the next encryption block is ciphertext in all cases. But still, this is a very fragile construction because what you need to identify the code is just this red bullet here. Take a Mac, for instance. Let's assume that you would like to embed, to derive a secure message authentication, symmetric message authentication code, embedding a hard-coded key. Basically, if you have a verification, for instance, into your mobile application, you will have some difficulties because in virtually all Macs we know about, the tag generation and the tag verification procedure are extremely similar. Basically, it works all like that. The sender computes a MAC on the message and transmit the message on the MAC. And the receiver does exactly the same operations and just compare the received MAC and the freshly recomputed MACs. So it means that here, those two oracles, the two operations are extremely similar, and it's very difficult to make it dissymmetric if you would like to have a white box instance. ASGCM, authenticated encryption, it's really the same. So you will have to be very careful about what you are doing because it uses kind of counter mode. So basically we see that the encryption part is using always the same encryption direction, so the same block cipher direction here. So if you swap just plaintext and ciphertext, what you obtain will be, depending on your implementation, will be a decrypted ciphertext, but with a wrong tag, because what enter into the tag computation mechanism is ciphertext and not the plaintext. So it means a new time that if we would like to transform an ASGCM whitebox encryption instance into a decryption instance, what you have to do is just to be able to feed the ciphertext here into that part, which is probably not so difficult. So it means here, the message I would like to convey is that if you have a secure whitebox iOS, it does not mean by far that you have a secure encryption or authenticated encryption primitive in the same way. You could try to hide a public modulus, for instance. I don't know why, but you could imagine doing that. So let's take our RSA-OIAP. So you have an encrypting RSA-OIAP whitebox instance. So is it possible to output the public modulus? For instance, if you would like to encrypt yourself some data to the backend. If you can assume that the public exponent is a standard one, and if you are in a whitebox setting, it means that you can stick the randomness to a known constant. So it means that you can know what will be the value of the padded message for every message. So what you can do is just use your instance to compute a ciphertext, so with a known padding, and do these operations here without any modular reduction. And you are going to take a huge number. For instance, if you have E equal 2 to the 16 plus 1, your C prime value here will be about 2 to the 24 bytes, which is my 1 million bytes number. But still, if you compute the GCD, so the greatest common divisor on those two values here, so 256 bytes, 2 to the 24 bytes, computing the GCD between those two values is kind of trivial. It takes less than 1 minute on my laptop, and you will recover N. So it means that here you can extract very algorithmically a public modulus. So there are a lot of caveats here with respect to crypto, and this is something I wanted to outline. So perfect, it's time to conclude. So today, we barely know how to implement secure cryptography in the white box model, unless maybe for incompressible implementations. By secure cryptography, I mean an implementation that can be provably, whose security can be provably linked to a hard, difficult problem, like we are doing it for RSA or AP or elliptic curves or the like today. So we don't know how to do it. Research is in progress, but still, white box crypto is useful. White box crypto is performed in practice by the industry. There are many, many secret designs out in the wild. And it's a very fun area to play with. And I think that's everything I wanted to say. So that's it.
Questions?
I take questions if you want.
Is it possible to keep up the resistance against all the timing attacks and side channel attacks when you do code dissolving?
That's a very good question. It depends on your algorithm for sure, but you will have to take you will have to ensure and to measure it and to have some experimental insurance that it works. But for sure, it's difficult. As soon as you begin to code obfuscate time constant algorithms, then everything evil can happen for sure. So it means here that we'll have also to try to mitigate this by using blinding techniques if you are doing, I say, public key operations. But then you will have to use some randomness. So the randomness coming out of the system is maybe not, you cannot trust it, so you will have to extract some randomness out of the message in a secret way, mixing this. So is it possible to have a good defense? Yes, it's possible to have a perfect defense, maybe not.
More questions?
Hello, is there anything between a white box and a gray box scenario where, for example, in Windows you have the TPM, so you hide stuff in there and nobody can access that. But is there anything where if you know that you're being observed by an attacker or malicious agent, you can change your behavior at runtime? Is there anything that is mentioned in the kind of game theory, right? You get, there's a lot of that in malware packers. If they know they are being executed in an environment or are being under debug, they will change their behavior, right? Is there anything that? So the role of deriving a white box crypto instance is really to make the life of an adversary costly. So everything is allowed. So I have mentioned common software obfuscation as well, common software tamper-proofing, but for sure you can also use anti-debug tricks and all this kind of stuff to take decision from internally to the implementation. All those anti-debug tricks are relatively easy to bypass, but to bypass them you will need some time, so some time is some money, so every time you increase a bit the cost of the adversary. But for sure, yeah, why not? You are in a white box setting, so you must defend.
Anybody else? No, so thank you.
Thank you.